Hello everyone, it's me. Welcome back to another episode of the Serial Killer Podcast. In this podcast, we're going to be talking about two individuals. One, super popular. The first one that we're going to get into is Ted Bundy. So, a little background about who Ted Bundy was. Ted Bundy was a 1970s serial murderer, rapist, and necrophiliac. He was executed in Florida's electric chair in 1989. His case has since inspired many novels and films about serial killers. So, first, we're going to go into a little background about Bundy's parents and siblings. Basically, his mom was 22 and unmarried when she ended up giving birth to Bundy. His father was an Air Force veteran, and he was a co-worker of Ted's and the author of the book The Stranger Beside Me. Because Ted's birth certificate lists his father as unknown, his biological father's identity may never be really confirmed. Let's see. His early life. Bundy was born in Burlington, Vermont on November 24th, 1946. Bundy's life ended up starting as his mother's secret shame because he basically humiliated her deeply religious parents. To hide the fact that he was a illegitimate child, Bundy was raised as the adopted son of his grandparents and was told that his mother and his sister basically didn't want him. Around the age of 3, he became fascinated by knives. A shy but bright child, Bundy did well in school, but he really didn't talk to anybody. As a teenager, a darker side of his character started to emerge. Bundy liked to peer in other people's windows. He thought nothing of stealing things from other people. He really just wanted to look. He ended up graduating from the University of Washington with a degree in psychology in 1972. He also was accepted into law school in Utah, but he never earned his degree. Bundy ended up confessing to 36 killings of young women across several states in the 1970s, but experts believe that the final tally may be closer to 100 or more. The exact number of women, to be exact, will really never be known, but he did follow a kinda gruesome pattern. He ended up raping his victims a lot before beating them to death. While there's a bunch of debate on Bundy, why he started killing, most sources normally say that he started his rampage around 1974. Many women in the Seattle area and in nearby Oregon went missing around this time. He often lured his victims into a car by pretending to be injured and asking for help. Their kindness proved to be a fatal mistake, apparently. I'm so sorry if you can hear my cat. He's biting his tail right now. I'm so sorry. Anyways, this is how Ted Bundy was caught. In the fall of 1974, Bundy ended up moving to Utah to attend law school, and women began to disappear there as well. The following year, he ended up getting pulled over by a police. The police wanted to search his car and uncovered a bunch of burglary tools, such as a crowbar, face mask, rope, and handcuffs. He ended up being arrested for the possession of all of these tools, and the police started to link him to a bunch of crimes. In 1975, he ended up getting arrested because of the kidnapping of Carol DeBranch, one of the few women to escape Bundy. He ended up being convicted and received a 1 to 15-year jail sentence. But that really didn't stop Bundy. Bundy escaped prison twice in 1977. The first time was he was indicted on murder charges for the death of a young Colorado woman, and he acted as his own lawyer in the case. During the trip to the courthouse library, he jumped out of a window and made his first escape. He was captured 8 days later, though. Excuse me. In December, Bundy escaped from custody again, and he climbed out a hole he made in the ceiling of his cell. He ended up dropping about 30 to 40 pounds in order to fit through that hole, though. Authorities didn't know that Bundy was missing for 15 hours, which, for being a serial killer, gave him a super big head start. After Bundy's second escape from prison, he eventually made his way to Tallahassee, Florida. On the night of January 14th, 1978, he broke into a sorority house at Florida State University and attacked 4 women, killing 2 of them. On February 9th, he kidnapped a 12-year-old girl named Kimberly Leach. These crimes marked the end of his murderous rampage, since he was soon pulled over by the police in February. The most damaging evidence connecting Bundy to the 2 murders at the university were the bite marks on one of the bodies, which were that just threw it to where they could easily match it to him. A little bit about the trial. Bundy ended up fighting for his life, but he was still convicted and spent 9 years on death row, appealing to his death sentence. In July 1979, Bundy was convicted of the 2 murders at the university, and he was given the death penalty twice. He received another death sentence in 1980 for the murder of Kimberly Leach. Bundy appealed, trying to take his case as high. Excuse me, sorry, I'm a little tired. He took it as high as the U.S. Supreme Court, but unfortunately he was kind of turned down. He offered a bunch of information on unsolved murders to avoid Florida's electric chair, but he could not delay justice forever and he was executed in 1989. Around 1996 and 1974, his girlfriend Elizabeth had no idea that Bundy was doing this. She was a single mom with a young daughter, but she also struggled with drinking problems. She started getting suspicious around 1974 and started questioning his behaviors, but with Bundy being Bundy, he ended up deflecting her concerns. So that was a little bit on Ted Bundy and everything that he basically went through. He died around 7 in the morning, and his body was cremated, and no public ceremony ended up being held. His ashes are scattered in the Cascade Mountains of Washington State, where he murdered at least 4 victims. So, that being said, with Ted Bundy, brings us to our next guest, Harold Shipman. A little bit about Harold Shipman, if you don't exactly know. He's a British serial killer. He worked in England as a medical doctor and killed over 200 of his patients just before his arrest in 1998. So, him being a doctor, in England, he was able to know the lethal amount being given to people in order just to kill them correctly. So, here's a little bit about him. Here's a little, synopsis about him. Shipman was born in England in 1946. He attended Leeds School of Medicine and began working as a physician in 1970. Between then and his arrest in 1998, he killed at least 215 to about 260 of his patients because he injected them with lethal doses of painkillers. That's pretty intense, especially between that time. That's a lot of people. Here's a little bit about his earlier life. Born the middle child of a working class. On January 14th, 1946, Harold Shipman, known as Fred, was a favorite child among his mother. When his mother was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, he willingly oversaw her care as she declined. He was fascinated by the positive effect that the administration of morphine had on her suffering until she kinda died from the disease on June 21st, 1963. He was really devastated about her death, and he was determined to go to med school, which led him to Leeds University Medical School for training 2 years later, having failed his entrance exams for the first time before serving his hospital internship. He was still a loner from then, but at the age of 19, he ended up meeting his future wife, Primrose. Although he was older, they got married whenever she was 17, and 5 months pregnant with her first child. By 1974, he was a father of 2, and ended up joining the medical practice in Yorkshire. A few years later, Shipman was accepted onto the staff of Donnybrook Medical Center in Hyde, where he started learning a lot more about medical terminologies and stuff like that. Going into his crimes, he was awfully requested from a bunch of patients. The local undertaker kind of noticed that Dr. Shipman's patients seemed to be dying at an unusually high rate, and most were in similar poses. They were fully clothed, usually sitting up or reclining on a chair. He was too scared to kind of approach Shipman about this, but Shipman ended up reassuring him that nothing was concerning at all. Another colleague of his, Dr. Susan Booth, also kind of found it disturbing that all of his deaths kind of ended the same. Hiding behind his status as a caring family doctor, it is kind of impossible to establish exactly when Shipman began killing his patients, or indeed exactly how many died at his hands, and his denial of all the charges, since nothing was kind of leading back to him. His killing spree did end up being brought to an end thanks to Angela Woodruff, the daughter of one of his victims, who refused to accept the explanations given for her mother's death. My bad, sorry. Woodruff was actually a lawyer and always handled her mother's affairs. So, whenever her mother ended up passing away, it was kind of sudden. And everything she went in for at the hospital really wasn't adding up. Although Shipman urged families to cremate their relatives in a large number of cases, stressing that there's going to be no further investigation into their deaths because it wasn't necessary. In situations, a lot of questions would rise, and Shipman was able to provide computerized medical notes from everything that he kind of wrote down for the death pronouncements. So from those times, it kind of started adding up a bit. Talking about his trial and the aftermath of it, police later established that Shipman would, in most cases, alter these medical notes directly after killing the patient to ensure that his account matched the historical records. Shipman failed to grasp that each alteration of the records would be time-stamped by the computer, enabling police to know exactly when the records had been altered. Shipman's trial was on October 5th, 1999. Attempts by his defense counsel, he tried to get out of it multiple times. But it didn't work. He was able to kind of get back, and the police were able to identify 15 patients that led straight back to him. Woodruff basically appeared as the first witness and gave her defense. A police computer analyst then testified about give me 1 second. Okay. So the computer analyst, he was basically able to go into the records as far as when they were first stated and when Shipman basically altered everything. And as the trial kind of progressed, onto the other victims and the relatives, the pattern between the pattern basically between Shipman's attitude as the trial kind of progressed kind of caught the judge, like, he basically knew something was going on with his attitude. And sorry if I'm kind of trailing off a little bit. He ended up, he was, okay, so, let me take a step back. The judge examined all of the records from the 500 patients who died while they were in Shipman's care, and the 2,000-page report concluded it was most likely he had murdered at least 218 of his patients. Although it's just a rough estimate to where it could be 218 all the way to 260. So that's kind of a lot. He also may have taken his first victim within months of obtaining his license to practice medicine, which is a 67-year-old Margaret Thompson, who died in March 1971 while recovering a stroke. And honestly, thinking about that's kind of scary, because we trust doctors so much that we think, like, nothing of that. And it's just, like, it's scary to think about that kind of stuff, you know? So, again, thank you guys so much for listening to me. I know I kind of trailed off in the end, I'm so sorry about that. And I was also yawning, and you could probably hear my cat fighting in the background, but that's basically all that I have for tonight. So, thank you guys so much for listening to this second episode of the Serial Killer Podcast with me. Leave a comment for who I should do next. Leave any suggestions that you have for me, or if you just want to comment something random, go ahead. If you got this far in the video, comment the word cookie. Psst, cookie. Okay, so, thank you guys so much for listening. Like, comment, subscribe. I won't force you to. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!